More energy for the good afternoon for the second segment of sessions that we have lined up. Should we try good evening then? Good evening, everybody. Okay, evening seems to work better. So we now move on to the final plenary of the day. Next, possibilities with digital public infrastructure. Can security and privacy engineering drive them? Joining us for this session are Colonel Anurag Avasthi, retired Vice President, Indian Electronics Semiconductors Association, Mr. Vinay Kesari, General Counsel, SETU, Mr. Subramanian Udayappan, Director, Sales for SecOps Solutions, Fortinet, Mr. Supriyo Ghosh, Senior Vice President, Open Network for Digital Commerce, ONDC, Ms. Chandni, Cybersecurity Lead, National Health Authority, NHA. And to moderate the session, we have Mr. Vinayak Godse, CEO, DSCI. Please put your hands together and welcome all of our panelists on stage. Over to all of you.
Yeah, so this is a kind of a plenary to conclude today's interactions that we started. Actually, we started yesterday only, and very intense interactions since last 2 days. We had been having different areas of security and privacy from now and what is going to happen for the future. And we know the digitization story of India is very different story where we build this story calling the interventions that we brought to Aadhaar and then UPI, and now we are trying to expand that in other areas as well. Right? That's why we call this the digital public infrastructure. So infrastructure which is made by for public basically, and largely this infrastructure is governed and controlled. Government definitely has significant role, but it has made it in such a way that the ecosystem is working together to deliver that value. And the entire paradigm digitization from high value, low volume to low value, high volume, which came because of one of these kind of interactions that we did. So I can start with Mr. Supriyo to just briefly talk about what do you mean by DPI, because some of the audience may not be even understanding the nuances and what it goes when we say DPI. Basically, our budget also talked about a lot of narration in G20. We are talking DPI. So can you briefly talk about what is DPI?
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So when we talk about digital public infrastructure, we started out with Aadhaar. It's kind of at a foundational layer. We started out with Aadhaar, then we went to UPI. Now we have ONDC. So ONDC, it's much more value-added kind of digital public infrastructure in the sense that it actually defines a protocol for digital commerce. So a lot of things. So if you see the evolution in digital public infrastructure, now these are things that we started at the foundational layer. Now we have gotten into the application layer. We're just trying to figure out how exactly it works. But what we are trying to do with ONDC is that it is actually it's kind of a decentralized protocol which enables democratization of digital commerce. So that's our mission statement, which is democratization of digital commerce. Now, traditionally, what happens is, in digital commerce, you have the platform players. So there are large platform players which control both the buyer side and the seller side, and they define the rules as to who can come in and be a part of digital commerce. What we are trying to do through ONDC is make it interoperable. We've kind of separated out the buyer side and seller side. And we've defined a protocol. Anybody that wants to participate in digital commerce, they can actually be a part of ONDC by just enabling the protocol. And so far, we've had we've had quite some success in terms of making sure that participants that wouldn't have been a part of digital commerce before, they are actually getting to participate in it for the first time. Now obviously you are, so this is one thing about ONDC, but the way digital public infrastructure is evolving, I think probably in future you might as well see something like, there's a lot of hype around LLMs. That is something, I know there's some work going on. So maybe we'll see DPIs for LLM also one day soon.
Yeah, so when coming to you, this public space and public interventions to do the digitization basically, right? How we started and where we are as of now and how we are looking in the future.
So, just to add to what Supriyo was saying, I think when it comes to DPIs, it's hard to overemphasize how important they are going to be, for India and possibly even for the world, right? And it really is one of the first times in recent years that India has, really found a new way of doing things, which is very disruptive, and which can really take the challenge to large entrenched players in other ecosystems. And the reason for that is, we are going sector by sector, right? Starting with identity, and then payments, and in even things like e-sign, and all the way up to financial data, and of course commerce, all types of e-commerce. And what we are doing is we're building public infrastructure that does not allow, or tries very hard to ensure that monopolies do not arise, right? And that there is better competition, and that we have something that is much closer to a perfect market for competition, right? And that is something that it's really hard to overstate the significance of that. I can't imagine any other country which has been able to address these problems of monopoly and competition and all of that, not through just laws, and I'm a lawyer by training, so I'm very familiar with that, but through technology, through protocols that bake in this concept of interoperability and so on. So DPIs have now become a kind of philosophy, right? It's a philosophical way of actually writing protocols and building networks, which you can now take horizontally across many sectors, practically every sector of the economy that you're talking about, especially when it comes to services of various kinds. Now, like going back to the topic of security and privacy, I think one great example of the positive role that DPIs can play comes from the account aggregator ecosystem. So some of you may be familiar with it, but I'll just very quickly help you understand what it does. Right now, we all have bank accounts, insurance policies, mutual funds, and so on. And all of the information related to those financial accounts and financial instruments is your information, right? That is your money, your transactions, but it is held by financial institutions, and it is often very hard for you to extract that data, make sense of it, and to transfer it to someone else in order to get a service that you want. To give you an example, when you want to take a loan, right, you are expected to provide bank statements, essentially provide a picture of your entire financial life that requires you to corral information from so many different places, which is all your information, right? Which even extremely tech savvy people like the people in this room can sometimes find challenging. Imagine someone who earns 200 rupees a day having to do this in order to get a loan, right? It can often be an insurmountable challenge. So the idea of the account aggregator ecosystem is to say, hey, let's create the concept of a consent manager, which is a licensed entity whose only job is to ensure that your financial data can be easily transmitted from the FIP, the financial information provider, which is the bank or the insurance company or whoever you have a relationship with, and the financial information user, the FIU, the entity to whom you want to transfer the information, right? And the job of the account aggregator is an extremely carefully defined job, which is to ensure that consent is correctly obtained from the citizen, from the user, right? So it's a very noble aim, and it's kind of a techno-legal solution to this whole idea of consent, which is baked into all privacy law, right? And now we have an act, right? The Privacy Act, and which enshrines the concept of a consent manager as well. And the beauty of the account aggregator ecosystem is that it bakes in security and privacy into this entire process. The whole point of the account aggregator is to act as a servant of the user. It is expected to surface the consent request, tell you exactly what the data is being used for, how long it is going to be used, right? And what data they are asking for. And it creates a digitally signed consent artifact, which can be audited at any point in the future, which proves what you gave consent for. So that tomorrow, if the FIU has taken your data and done something different with it, done something you did not consent to with it, you can actually go back to your AA, ask for the consent artifact and say, hey, this is incontrovertible evidence because it is digitally signed, saying that I gave you consent to use this data only for X, why are you using it for Y? Yeah. Right? And tomorrow when we have a data protection board and so on, you can actually raise a dispute and go and fight and win a case relatively easily because you have digital evidence which will cost you nothing to retrieve.
Yeah. So these are I think the solution of this problem nowadays getting quite a good traction, and we achieved quite significant progress with respect to the financial transaction processing, and now we are going to, as you talked about, different sectors basically, and now next key thing which is coming is health sector. So Chandna, in the context of the effort, like we have seen Aadhaar, we have seen NPCI, now NHA is trying to build something to solve problem of health services, which is a very difficult problem to solve, through this intervention that we are trying to bring in DPI way. So how that is evolving?
Right. So, Government of India has aimed that we should have a digital health ecosystem for all citizens.
Can you just
yeah. So Government of India has taken initiative and they have created the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare have created the National Digital Health Blueprint, and they have also conceptualized the Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission, which will be a digital ecosystem for collecting the health information for all the citizens. So we are creating a universal health ecosystem wherein it's a federated architecture basically, and through which we will be able to, point to point, it will be a connectivity, and then the data and privacy, the security and privacy of the data is on the top priority. We have the robust, security systems in place. And one thing I would like to, highlight here is that being a critical healthcare system, we have also listed ourselves as the critical infrastructure of, India. So with this NCIIPC, which is the nodal agency for the security, and we abide by all the compliances which are, which are given by the NCIPC. We abide by the MITRE guidelines, and also since we perform the authentication on, for the citizens, and we also do the eKYC for our schemes, Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission and Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. So there we have taken some licenses from the DPI, the UIDI, the digital public infrastructure, and the regulations, they are binding us with the for fulfilling all the compliance requirements, and there are proper testings, there are validations, there are audits by the third parties, by the certain panel agencies. So in a nutshell, I would say that there is a complete robust security system for protecting the health information, and we ensure that the PHI is not stored for the PHI, the PII is protected, and with the DPDP coming in picture, and I mean, it's a law now. So I think, we'll have to abide by the DPDP Act as well. Yeah.
So now, coming to Colonel Anurag, right? So the volume, almost 10 billion, we are reaching to per month 10 billion volume transactions that UPI would be transacting, and this is still early days of digitization that we see. Now, every sector is now trying to put this kind of architecture, and probably we'll see quite significant volume and velocity of the data that will be flowing and the transaction that will be happening basically. And on the other side, we are also now seeing, because of this way, we probably have our own demand and requirements which is coming in basically. And we're also making a big bet on a semiconductor and hardware ecosystem basically. So when it comes to now the next digital infrastructure that we are talking about, so how, and this volume and velocity of transaction that we will be seeing from the coming years of time basically, how the semiconductor industry and the white plan which is evolving basically will be supporting this entire DPI ecosystem.
Thank you, Vinayak. I think I'm right now surrounded by three vectors. My good friend Vinayak's incisive question, this watch, which is going back, and Chandrayaan landing.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So I'll be brief. Firstly, you know, as a lot of people are alluding to the fact that chips are the new oil, right? Everything and anything that you do is now going to be functioning on the chips.
Yeah.
Now, we'll not go into the history and geography as to what happened and what did not happen. But beyond technology also, firstly, a lot of people need to understand that this is a function of geopolitics. Now, there are three things which essentially, you know, to break it down for all of you in a very, very readable format is that the semiconductors or the chips are made of. So the troika of materials, the troika of equipment, and the troika of servicing and packaging. Now, when you look at it, most of the material is based out of Asia and all over the world in global supply chains, right? When you look at the materials, the equipment, 80% of the equipment is made by the United States with around 52% of IPR. Then you look at the packaging, most of the packaging is, you know, generally concentrated around China. And when you look at the maximum manufacturing is all Asia. So when you look at Taiwan, and then you look at Japan, Korea, Malaysia, some part of Vietnam, and now India. Now, look at this on a big world map, add pandemic of COVID on it, and superimpose it with the Ukrainian conflict. I think it's a recipe for disaster. Just look at it. See how they are stretched. Now the problem is even more grave. You are in 2021, the Indian semiconductor market was $119 billion. It's likely to reach $300 billion by 2030. 300 billion, B for billion, right? You're the second largest automobile market in the world. Your wearable market is going to be number one. You're the second in startups, one of the most internet users in the world. Look at the numbers, look at the demand. And thereby, the issues of security, the issues of, you know, various other issues which all of us are very sanguine of. Now, you have two, three very, very important things insofar as the semiconductor things are concerned. The government policies are rather astute, with the PLI coming in, with the DLI coming in, the main readable Indian semiconductor policies, the states now garnering attention, they, you know, competing with one another, that look, I can give you more SOPs than the other one. The design-linked intensive, by the way, India's pool of designers of the world is 22%, a staggering 22%. A lot of people don't know it. Most of it concentrated around here, this traffic-infested city of Bengaluru, right? And then, of course, along with this, the PLI, DLI, the specs, that is for the components, the C2S chips to startups. So the policies are very enabling. In addition to policy, the design or the fabless companies, as we just spoke, Vinay and me, are coming up in a very, very big manner. So by the time your manufacturing things comes up, you already have a lot of, you know, bootstrapping insofar as the design part is concerned. The packaging, Micron is already announced. It's just a question of time. The other players also come in. I will not allude more to that. And of course, you're churning out 1.5 million engineers every year. So it's not quantity. We are not talking about quality. We are not talking about anything. But yes, there is a talent pool which is available. Now, how you do it, how you hone it, is an acme of skill. If you ask me personally, Vinayak, I think that is the Achilles heel in the entire system. Yeah. Skilling. Because you, at the end of the day, you may have the money, you may have a lot of things happening, you may have the demand, but if you don't have qualified people, then who will run it? So that itself is a little problematic thing. So all in all, if you ask me, I think we are headed for a big rise. And as I always say, you know, India is a country which has a capability of disappointing both the optimist and the pessimist alike. So yeah. I'm an optimist. Let's see how it works out. I think we are good to go.
As we are with you, right? So in this conference, security and privacy is very important component. Yesterday we spent some time, almost one day, to understand the issues that will happen at hardware, right? Absolutely. So in the overall work that is happening on semiconductor and all these things, so how the agenda for security, because the kind of volume and velocity the things will happening and the flow will happen. So you may not able to do a software way. And also you also have a lot of challenges, supply chain challenges with respect to the chip, right, which is coming in. So, so securing the chip, silicon basically, right? So any specific effort, we are putting from our side, but any specific effort that?
I think if you ask me personally, the future is that even your chips will be embedded.
Yeah.
with security systems.
Yeah.
I don't think that they're going to be devoid of the security apparatus from the very inception. The second thing is that what I personally feel is that the digital infrastructure, as we just spoke, uh, the way the world is going to be going, I don't think people are going to be owning digital infrastructure. They'll be subscribing to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've all seen it, from Doordarshan to that cable to that set-top box and now OTT. I mean, it's just a cycle, right?
Yeah.
So somewhere down the line, you will find that the digital infrastructure first will be subscribed. So the moment you subscribe it, a lot of things change.
Yeah.
And then that is how the primacy of chip will again come in. Whether it is embedded, not embedded, how is it being used, who's got the IP, what is its firewall, who is going to do what. So it's a very complex quagmire. I really don't know what the future holds, but I think insofar as the security part is concerned, I think the chips are going to be embedded the way they're going.
Yeah. So let me come to Subramaniam, because we are talking security here, and the future next 2-3 years, with so many things happening, the volume increasing, the speed of network is rising. We are almost already hitting 2 terabytes per second kind of a network, right? And on top of that, we are seeing all of these kind of possibilities, one application platform, now protocol on top, but top of that protocol, a lot of these new application, digital public infrastructure is coming in basically. So what kind of thinking we should be doing for the security?
Okay, so when it comes to the digital public infrastructure, the first thing is we are talking about a huge amount of data that's going to go public first.
Yeah.
It's going to get ported onto internet. And your mobile phone is going to become the most powerful device ever that you've used. And when you start offering services to public directly from this handheld device, or through the cloud, through any public infrastructure, the expectation from the public is obviously the speed and performance. Any transaction has to happen seamlessly, very smooth. And at that point of time, everybody takes cybersecurity for granted. Everybody thinks, obviously, you have to take care of my data. If I'm coming onto your platform, it is your responsibility to take care of my data. And geopolitically, as India grows in influence, as India's stature grows in the world, so will the attacks on the public infrastructure in India, in terms of numbers and also in terms of sophistication. So we are going to be faced with challenges of capacity. We are going to be faced with challenges of performance, privacy, security, and even geopolitically. In a situation like this, the way we are doing cybersecurity today is not going to hold good anymore. We have gone past the line, way past the line of handling cybersecurity in a manual way. We will have to embrace automation and AI in a big way. We will have to train our AI models to handle a lot of things for us. Automation and AI is the way forward for us as a country, individually, as organizations, and even as individuals. That's the way forward. All the worries about AI and automation taking away jobs that you see on news is of no consequence anymore.
And one of the thing is, as network will be passing this traffic, so network and security has to work together, right? So to deliver that security value, right?
In fact, yeah, I agree with Colonel on that. Security is going to be embedded into every level. It's not just going to be at the network, not just at the end user devices. It's going to be embedded right from the chips to every level. In fact, to a large extent, the government has already mandated the service providers provide a certain level of security. Like when I was talking about, the AAs and data fiduciaries also have to maintain a certain level of security.
Yeah.
So it's going to be embedded into every level.
So one hand, we look at a lot of push and force on digitization. Other hand, regulatory ecosystem is also significantly become more stringent or more specific, right? I would like to come to, I think, Chandni, like compliance in this ecosystem, right? How do you see? Briefly, you can talk about so that we can cover one more question from each of you, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
So from the compliance compliance perspectives, I think there are great rules and regulations, which are already there for the DPIs. So the entity who is using the licenses from the DPIs, I think they have to abide by all the regulations. It almost covers, which I have seen in the compliance front, that it covers each and every domain of information security, be it its network security, logical security, or any part of security. I mean, the AppSec as well, because the thorough audits are done by the certain impanel agencies, and it is essential that every entity which is using these license are required to provide these reports timely to the ministry, to the concerned ministries, to the all the security bodies, and to the AU authority, AUKU authority, UIDI. We have to submit the report. So the compliances covers almost all the domains. When I said it is, it also considers the ISMS framework, the ISO 27001 framework, and complete domain security is checked internally as well as the externally by the auditors. So the compliance has to be in place to ensure that, and also it gives us that, assurance that yes, we are on the right track. We have built-in security in place. We have a privacy by design. We have a privacy by default while we are developing any building blocks, and which are especially wherein the infrastructure is used by it's a citizen-centric infrastructure. Then it is essential that we abide by all the compliances. We take utmost priority on when we are developing any applications.
Yeah.
So that is in place from the compliance perspective.
One of the key thing from the role that you play, and I would like to come to Supriya as well. So now this public infrastructure that you would be running, right? And on top of that, people are writing application. Top of that, a lot of intermediation happening. People are, for in case of ONDC for that matter, Supriya, end user, seller, buyer, right? So until now, we know compliance and security from enterprise context perspective. I and my client, and I secure it. But now you are managing this infrastructure where a lot of those transactions are happening in so many different places because you are democratizing the infrastructure. So what it goes in terms of designing security there and make sure that it provides that level of security and privacy assurance?
Sure. So if you look at security for a network, now there are different participants in the network. What ONDC does is it actually provides the digital infrastructure for them to connect. Now, the few aspects of security that I want to talk about is, one is the identity of a participant. Now, this is an open network. Anybody can come and spoof somebody else. How do we know that a participant is who they claim they are? So establishing the identity of a participant. Now, there are ways to do it. There are digital certificates.
We have to just reflect to what he's saying. I'm just trying to add. Sure. This is an open network where anybody can participate. Because public infrastructure, by default, it should be participatory in nature. Right. And that's why identity is very important. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. So just to add to what Vinayak said, ONDC, if you look at ONDC, all our endpoints are public. It's available in the public domain. Now, anybody can try and do a transaction on ONDC. You can try and do a transaction on ONDC, but we have security mechanisms in place to find out whether it's a genuine participant or not. And if it is not a genuine participant, then it gets rejected. So the identity, establishing the identity of a participant, we actually have a pretty innovative way. We've done it in ONDC. So no digital certificates. I think everybody knows digital certificate, getting a digital certificate. So the one who actually created the security architecture, he said, I don't want a seller to go and line up outside a government office, for 3 months to get a digital certificate and then do it every year and all that. So first is establishing the identity. We have a pretty innovative way of establishing identity. Next is, the data which is collected as part of a transaction, that is actually owned by the end participants. So it is like the buyer, on the demand side, there are these buyer apps like PhonePe has a buyer app, Paytm has a buyer app. They keep the buyer data. The seller side, whatever data is related to the order, that is with the seller network participants. Now, there is a small amount of information that actually needs to flow to make sure that the fulfillment of an order happens successfully. Just to give you an example, if I place an order on PhonePe, the transaction-related information will flow through the network. Let's say it goes to a Bitsila, Dunzo, whatever it is. Now, I have to send my name, my contact details, because when the logistics rider comes to deliver, they need to, they have to call up somebody to find out, where I'm located, whether I'm there or not. So my phone number goes in. Now that is a PII as per the DPDP bill. And now what happens is we've clearly defined the limitation of purpose. So this data goes only for a specific purpose, and beyond that, it is not expected to be used. But the data, so the participants are responsible for the data security, and whatever PII flows as part of the network, it's bound by a purpose limitation. So one of the things, which is the topic of this meet, which is the, how do we use security and privacy engineering to enable DPIs? I think a lot of these things, we can actually embed through privacy engineering. So how do you make sure that, the PII that flows over the network, to somebody else, how do we know that it's actually bound by the limitation of purpose? It's not getting used beyond that. I mean, I'm sure we can come up with some innovative engineering ways of doing it instead of doing like a post-facto audit and all that. So I think that's broadly in place. I mean, the security of data, identity of participants, and the privacy of data that flows through.
So let me come to Vinay, and probably then after that I will invite audience questions. So in this entire ecosystem where everything seems unbundled, everything seems to be getting intervention, and while doing that, volume and velocity is rising, and on the other side, we have compliance obligations rising, basically. So startups which are enabling this digitization, so they will also get a lot of heat from the clients that you are serving, for that matter, right? So would they be worried about working with fintech startup or any other startups? We usually get that. I mean, we engage with cybersecurity startups, so we always have this, like, our compliance burden is rising, so there is some hesitation to work with startups. So do you see that, all this intervention happenings, do you see that as a key challenge that startup community will be facing?
Yeah, no, that's a very important question, very timely for us, especially for a company like us. So, I think so there are multiple examples of DPIs right now, but I can speak most clearly about what is happening in the account aggregator ecosystem, right, which is one of the newer sort of examples of a DPI, and it's just on the cusp of customer adoption and becoming large. And there, it's a mixed bag in the sense that in order to become an account aggregator, you need to get a license from the RBI, and that is a very serious process. You undergo extremely rigorous tests by REBIT, which is the RBI's technology arm, right? You undergo an information security audit. You have to be certified by a certain panel auditor and so on. And on top of that, you undergo a 2 to 3 day audit by REBIT officials who delve into every aspect of your product. You have to actually run your product live, show them the logs, send them the logs of the transactions you did during the demo with them. They will look, if you're running on the cloud, they will go into your AWS settings, actually check to make sure that all the configurations are the way you said they are, and so on. So it is extremely rigorous, right? And nothing gets past them. They are very, very good at their jobs. At the same time, what we do see is that when it comes to large incumbent players, like large banks, PSU banks and private banks and so on, even those startups, smaller companies have gone through all of these rigorous checks and have received a license from the RBI, have gone through standardized information security testing and processes, we still do see some hesitation to accept all of that at face value, right? And so there is a bit of work, I think, that needs to be done there in the form of, maybe process innovation, maybe more standardization. I don't know if there can be a standards or auditing body that would be trusted by all of the banks, where if you get an InfoSec audit done by them, then they will automatically trust it. I don't know.
We see at that level where optimization of compliance is certainly because it's coming from law or other kind of thing.
Maybe we need some kind of audit DPI, where everyone will automatically trust what's there and it's publicly accessible and so on.
But it's a good idea. I mean, why can't be security or audit as a DPI, right? So Yeah, means there is a, but that is still a very compliance-driven process basically. But we have some time. We can take a couple of questions. We wanted to really touch this subject because usually in enterprise context we don't talk about what do you mean by DPI, and we have now these infrastructures coming in. Yeah, Sunil, can somebody pass a mic there, please, quickly? Yeah.
Amazon will take the liability or they go into the issues.
I got the question. I will take one or two more questions so that collectively I know to whom this question to be asked. Any other question? Anybody want to? Okay. This is a Supriyo question to you, right? So if this network is taking and it is becoming participatory, so who is responsible to ensure that actually? And how can you bring that?
So what do you want to, so your question is related to an issue that happens, related to a particular order. How do you find out who is responsible? Considering that everything is unbundled, how do you find out who is responsible, right? Now, so it's like if I order, if I order an iPhone on PhonePe, Paytm, whatever it is, and I got a brick, for example, right? Now, this was a very publicized incident which happened some time back. Now what I do is, since I ordered from PhonePe or Paytm, I go and file an issue there that this is what has happened. I take a photo of the brick that I got, I post it and I send it. Now what they do is they try to find out, okay, what exactly is the issue is this something related to, is this something that they can solve? If they can't solve, they know who actually fulfilled the order. Now the order was probably fulfilled by some electronics retailer, and either they themselves delivered the order. It might have been Sangeeta Mobiles who actually delivered the order, or they actually used, let's say, a Dunzo or a Shadowfax to deliver the order, right? So if the buyer side they can't resolve it, then they send it to the seller side. Seller side will then resolve it with the fulfillment or the logistics provider, fulfillment logistics provider, and sort it out between them. So there are, so what we do is we actually define the process very clearly in terms of how exactly an issue needs to be communicated and who needs to resolve this. But there is a governance mechanism also defined. So one is software. There's an issue which is filed, it is sent. But then there are GROs that are required, like grievance redressal officers on both sides. They have to, they have to try to resolve it. So if it can't be resolved by the buyer side directly, then they get involved. If they can't resolve it, then we also are enabling a ODR mechanism. It's like an online dispute resolution mechanism in place where there'll be independent, so that'll have two processes, two steps. There's a mediation, there's an arbitration. And if they also can't resolve it, of course, participants can go to court. But what we want to do is, even in case of Amazon, I mean, they'll take the liability, they'll refund you, but finally they'll charge the seller only, right, who actually shipped it. So what we've done is, in this kind of a unbundled supply chain, we've defined the process and defined how exactly all these issues should flow through the process and what is the process for resolution.
Yeah. Hope that answers the question, right? So this ecosystem, which is very unbundled, participatory, open ecosystem, right? And then at the same time, this digital public infrastructure ecosystem, which is evolved, and with success in one area, we're going in other areas as well. We are trying to address and attack this problem from various different perspectives. We know that it is also, it's our requirements and use cases, and that's why our solutions which are coming in, and this is a very unique solution we found. That's why technologically also we are trying to see semiconductor and other technologies, how can we leverage them better, and we build those ecosystem in the country. And this is very different than typical concerns that we professionals have been looking at, where we mostly, it's enterprise and consumer, or enterprise B2B context. But this is, we are talking about public infrastructure, right? And that is what we wanted to cover through this plenary discussion. Hope it was useful to understand this, and we'll do many more such discussion to unpeel many of those aspects here. Thank you, Kunal, Vinay, Channa, Supriyo, and Subramanyam for joining us. Please join me to give big hand to this panelists. Thank you.
I think more importantly, while the session was on, we successfully landed on the moon. So
Oh,
I think that deserves a lot
yeah,
more
that's
applause.
also, yeah. And that's the, in the context of last 2 weeks, what happened in moon landing is the major development that we can now claim up. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Check. A very special thanks to all the panelists for that wonderful session.